quite a number of forums. He has been a moderator with Interop, so we know him quite well. And he is currently going to talk on cloud computing, and where risk is good. The session will cover the various nonlinear models and why cloud computing, the disruptive technology, can help transcend the business objectives, some key drivers and risk which can influence the cloud computing initiatives, why cloud computing risk is good for companies and an opportunity to leapfrog into the next league, some success stories and the lessons learned. Please come in, sir.
I've got to make it quick, right? And I'm for sure you folks will help me get there real quick. So I really thank the last speaker to give the overview in terms of he kind of really set the stage about talking about what's the future like. But I want to kind of do something very different while these folks still going to come along and get my presentation up here. What I have planned out here, and when Srikanth told me that, hey Ravi, you got a slot, so do you want to take the last slot? I said, okay. So maybe it's good to have the last word, right? So I'm going to try and have the last word on the conference by the time we close here. And thank you everybody for just being here and selecting this session over the other sessions that we have got. Just quickly a few other things just to set context in terms of where this is all coming from. Just want to see a show of hands here. I've seen TCS. I was part of TCS earlier, where I've kind of seen the platform story and also seen this TCS small and medium business story that we all heard. If some of you attended the session that was on small and medium business, right, by Swami. So I've kind of got that experience, plus there's a lot of referential reading plus research that I kind of do on my own. So what I'm presenting here is, first let me just qualify. I'm not talking, I work for Mphasis, but this is not an Mphasis presentation. This is my work that I've kind of put together. And the other thing, I'm also the chairman of Computer Society of India in Bombay. So if some of you are from Bombay, that should be great. If you come along, say hi. We should see you folks there. I'm sure there'll be enough technology right there for us to start collaborating as well. I'm just getting the filler while these folks set this thing up. Okay, we're all set? Okay, thank you. Is it? Alright folks, so what I wanted to do is, I thought we stopped at the last point, the show of hands, right? Quick show of hands, how many of you are working for a services company? Okay. How many of you work for product companies? Alright, that's amazing. How many of you here have got a patent filed? Anyone of you here who's got a patent filed? Are you getting there? Aspiring to get there? Great. I think that's something which we need to talk about. Over yesterday and till now, we heard a lot of speakers talk to you about cloud computing, challenges, risks, and so on and so forth. But I just wanted to kind of change the stage, and this is what I've got in the presentation for all of you to start looking at, is give you a provider view from a services standpoint, plus also talk from something from a product standpoint, just to paint the landscape in terms of what we have got. What is the opportunity that we have got, and what is that we folks can start looking at and start doing different. We'll try and get it again, and then from there I'm going to kind of change the stage and talk to you about from a larger global landscape. There's a survey which is there, so I'll touch upon that survey, a little bit of it, and then we get into talking about some success stories and some lessons learned. I think success stories, I'm sure you'll hear more about that, but just in the interest of the time, and as we said, we're going to keep it fast, right? I'll focus a little more on the lessons learned, and then let's try and make that interactive, and I'll share my experiences, and if you have anything that you want to share, we'll talk about it. So with that, let's go on. Interesting, busy? Okay, if you can't read it, let me just kind of just give you a quick gist of what we're talking about. So we've got, this is a graph we're talking about revenue per employee growth, global IT services versus Indian IT services. So we've got 4 IT companies popular. You got TCS, Mphasis, Cognizant, and Wipro, HCL, and pure play IT services companies, that's got Accenture, Capgemini, Atos, Origin, and CSC. So that's just setting the context, right? Now if you see something very good, right, growth has been fantastic as far as IT services companies are. So if you start seeing over the last few years that we have got, that is the growth that we have got. Now if you just see the comparison between the pure play other companies versus the Indian IT companies, I'm sure we'll double our headcount very easily. But what about the revenue? Not going that far. Revenue growth is at the rate of 21%. Employee additions, I think we are doing fantastic with 18%. So if you see a factor from a non-linearity standpoint, a metric that we can look at is revenue per employee. So that's not really great if you see that, right? And where are we if you start looking at it? If you start looking at it from a revenue per employee from an Indian and an IT services company standpoint, we really start seeing something to the range of almost about 4 times, right? 4 to 6 times is the difference that we have got from a services standpoint. So that is really forcing us to now sit back and start thinking and doing something different. But the journey is already started off by companies, and what are we starting to do and look at? And this is something that you should all look at. I'm sure from a product company and also from a services company standpoint, there would be a lot of investments which would have been going in building intellectual property, right? There are some companies who are already invested in creating platform BPOs. I'm sure this is the conference all about, right? We'll talk a little bit about that. But some companies are doing something very neat is in terms of picking up what? Some other companies quickly to take on, get an advantage out there, more from an idea standpoint. I think the days are gone when you wanted to acquire customers, right? You've been hearing a lot of that. You wanted to go get into a new geography. You wanted to do something else. Is that changing today? Some popular examples before we go on. Popular examples would be, anyone wants to help me out? You heard of Google taking on Android? More from an idea standpoint. YouTube, some completely different. Apple, great device, right? But what is that one great application that everybody uses? Siri? If you use an Apple, right? If you use an iPhone, what have you got on that? Siri is a great tool that we have there. Now something else, if you start seeing, we heard some of the speakers talk to you about success factors being taken over by someone. What is that? They didn't have play in cloud computing, so they kind of take somebody else out there. You want to go ahead and build that aspect of it. So similarly, there are enough and more examples that we talk about. Now let's come back, and I'll keep the intellectual property piece a little bit for a while. Now here, some companies, just to go ahead and get that linearity, is from pricing standpoint. So they're getting a little creative in offering you different outcome-based pricing and so on and so forth. Multiple models you would have heard of. So that's incremental. Is that going to get you a big difference? Not much. Okay, branding. People who want to go ahead and talk themselves as, hey, we are a X type of company, we offer you all of that stuff. Is that going to help you so much? Not as much. People are looking for what? People are looking for pure value. And value can come in, and if you start seeing, is in terms of getting into some areas like these, looking at creating a platform BPO, is wherein you're leveraging some application or something which is readily built, and see how you can go ahead and use that to service a lot of customers, right? That's what we're looking at. And last but not the least, is an area that people are investing a lot is in terms of building their own IP. And you see, and I will talk about that in a minute. But I missed this one out for a. Tell me, how many of you within your own spaces, right? Just a quick show of hands, have got accelerators for solutions? Do you leverage like accelerators within your own enterprises? Work that you folks do? A solution accelerator? Do you build something up? Is there a thrust on that from a library that you folks built up? A component library, you would have some framework, you would have something to that effect. If you see, people are starting to invest a lot more in terms of from a vertical standpoint, whether it be any domain, you'll have a framework, a specific framework. Now, if, let's say there are companies who will do work for government, so they'll build a framework around that. If there's something around services for banking, you would have a complete framework around that. Now, what companies are starting to do is they have kind of gone ahead and built these delivery accelerators, which is very, very specific in terms of how you would go ahead and address the business need of a particular process is what you're looking at. So here is another opportunity for companies to go ahead and leverage, because what we've got here and what we really been talking about and what you really heard a lot of people talk about is in terms of, yes, you could do virtualization, you could do a lot of good stuff around that aspect of it. However, but what is that eventually one would get onto? You can talk about all your business applications, but eventually it's talking about money, right? When you're talking about money, it's about a process. If it's a manufacturing customer, what is he looking for? A specific process. to keep not only keep the lights on, that's one thing that you're looking at. That's what most of the applications are. But what is there beyond that? You want to see something a little more than that aspect. And that is where one is going to start looking at it, starting to see something here. But here we're looking at changing the entire system of focusing more on business processes. You could do whatever. If the business process gets better, if you keep working on that, things change. Now, on this note, let's go on and just take a sneak preview of the product companies. Where are we with the product companies? So, quickly talking about the Indian companies, the service companies. So, you got TCS, Mphasis, Cognizant, Wipro, HCL. And the global software product companies we have to measure is Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Adobe, and Symantec. Now, here again, very interesting. If you start seeing the number of employees that are there in the respected companies versus the revenue that is there. Quickly, the revenue per employee is in the range of anything from 20, right? 10 times to 20 times the revenue for an Indian company. What does that tell you? Is that an opportunity you see there? Do we all see an opportunity in terms of what we can start doing something really different? And how can we start doing something really different? We can start doing something really different, and this is what a lot of companies are already started embarking on. Now here we are talking about some popular companies as TCS, Infosys, and Wipro. So these many patents are already filed by these companies. Is it interesting? Did we know of how this is going on? But let me tell you something else which is really not reported. There is a complete revolution that is going on, and if you notice, I asked all of you a question, not for any other reason, because invariably, at least out of 100 to 1,000 people who you would meet, right, on a day-to-day basis, you will encounter one person. I'm telling you, in this conference, I met 6 people who have patents filed, their own patents. Interesting? Now, if you go across and take a look at the exhibition space, and I invited the gentleman to come here. You heard about CloudByte? There was a stall out there. So they've got about 6 patents filed on their own. New companies, growing up, identified an opportunity out there, and created a complete offering around that. Very interesting. So can you just go ahead and, if you were to just go ahead and add up the number of companies out in India who already have got patents filed, right? And they are building on, can you see where we are going? And that's a complete different revolution. And every time you go out and meet somebody else, you'll find, hey, listen, I've got a very specific solution which is catering to a need. And then in time you find they get being taken up, acquired by somebody else, right? It's so specific. And that's what you start seeing also from an M&A standpoint. So that's opportunity for everyone. And yesterday on the keynote, you heard from Huawei, right? Their president talking about they being the number 3rd company with the number of patents. But here we are, right? Now, what also needs to be heard and known is Google. I think we have not heard the news, but they were to go ahead and finalize their acquisition of Motorola Mobility. How many patents? 17,000 patents. So why are they acquiring a mobile company? How does that align with their larger game plan as far as Google is concerned, right? They're a pure play device manufacturer and everything else put together versus a Google. So here, is that a great idea or a new idea which is going to come and hit us? Like an Android which they acquired in 2005, and we're starting to see the light of the day where it really is taken off, right? YouTube, did any one of us hear about it? Till the way it has been packaged and it has come out? So you never know what the game plan is, but if you start seeing there are companies who are looking out for new ideas, right, which is going to get them that non-linearity from a standpoint. Now that's the reason why I wanted to bring in non-linearity for all of us to look at. So there are 2 ways for one to go ahead and get it to that level, right? It's not just about the revenue per employee. We're talking about something here, and that is how much of creative time are teams investing to come out with something which is new, which is going to go ahead and make a difference to people's lives, right? Or are we going to continue to keep spending time doing operational stuff? We heard a lot of examples, right? A lot of technology is what we have seen, which is going to help make your life a lot more easier. It's a lot more commoditized, right? That's what we heard from a lot of presentations that we have got out here. But do we see an opportunity here? Do we want to see and do something very different here? That's really for us to look at, be aware of it, and just join this revolution going on. I'm not going to go talk much about this, right? There's enough that has been spoken about. But what I want to start giving all of you is for you to take away a few thoughts. A few thoughts in terms of, and we'll touch this, touch this upon in a bit. Let's talk about the last bullet. I'm sure you heard about this pay as you use, right? What if you don't use? Did you ever think about this? What if you don't use? Culturally, we are great. Once you buy something, it is there. Do we think of change so easily? I think the world is forcing us to change. There's mobile number portability. How much of an impact does it have on you? Another provider, not a lot of money, so you did. Some of you did that, right? In Bombay, let me give another example. So there are two electricity providers. So we had Reliance, who had taken over some company, and there's Tata Power. Tata Power gives us a benefit of almost 20 to 30% reduced pricing for the same services that we have got. Okay. How much of a change as far as me as a consumer? Nothing. All I have to do is fill some forms. Electricity continues as it. But will it be good for business? Can you just snap an existing process that you have got? So just try and visualize, not only from our standpoint as consumers, but also from our customer standpoint, what is the outcome and what is that we as providers, one scenario, and two, we as customers will have to kind of go about the ordeal that you'll have to go about if you're going to just stop using. So we'll say, okay, I need my data back. What do you do after that? What do you do after that? Some thoughts? So I think it's about time that we also start looking at and start raising our thought processes in terms of identifying and working on those areas which is going to improve. We can talk about a lot of good things. So now is this okay so far? So let's go on. Let's go on. I'm going to start building on this to kind of get you into another scenario. Okay, you heard of Business Software Alliance, BSA? It's a company who kind of goes ahead, works with just about every other IT company, more from a product standpoint. There's an alliance, so they help build standards, talks to various government agencies and so on and so forth. So they kind of did a first of its kind scorecard and looked at about 24 different countries, okay, who's got about 80% of the ICT spend. And what they came out with is, they said, okay, listen, it works with our blueprint, but for us what we need to do is let's find out some policy categories. Now, all of us know about universal truths. Very simple. It doesn't matter which country you go, you can still work with it, but that universal truth is something which is ingrained, right? Nobody's taught us about that. You know how when you interact with people. Similarly, at a very, very base level, if you start looking at, what does one start looking at expecting? So if you want to start looking at using cloud computing, we're looking at something which is data privacy. All of us would have some email account, Gmail or whatever it is. Did you go ahead and have it? Did you go ahead and sign anything out there or whatever it is? That your data is not going to be misused or whatever it is. You have faith that nothing is going to get abused. So you are okay with that? So is our customers looking at. So when we talk about it as providers, right, and consumers. So now please start wearing different hats, right? So when you're wearing a hat of a user, are you different? But when you're starting to be a provider, how do you go ahead and get that faith in, right? Similarly, when you're looking at security, what are people looking at? Hang on, time out. So let me just go back on the data privacy piece, right? India is peaceful, but there are a lot of countries where a provider will have to go ahead and sign up. They have to go ahead and make lots of disclosures. We have also got, right, acts and so on and so forth, but providers need not go ahead and sign up on a whole bunch of things. So the provider, what do the provider want? They want flexibility to move data from one place to another place, right? So they can't be going ahead and signing forms. It's like not going and paying octroi. You pay octroi every time you pass through a different state or whatever the case be, depending on what is there. So imagine your data passing from one place to another, you got all that regulation. So imagine the pricing that we talk about. Would that be easy for you to work with? One thought, right? Moving on. Security. We all talk of security. I think it's been beaten. And that's most important thing as far as we are concerned. What is that one word we talk about? Assurance. You don't want to kind of get challenged on that front. Cyber crime. If you see the last, how many of you watch Bond movies? James Bond movies? I like James Bond, right? You see some of the last movies? It's all about data, right? You had the Golden Eye, you had a whole bunch of other movies. It's all about data. You see where is it all getting to? In some form or the other, they have been talking about cyber crime, right? And from that standpoint, just visualize that there is a huge data center where there is all that data. And if that data happens to be yours or your customer's data, and some terrorists take over a data center. Not fine? Not heard of it so far, right? But if you go down to any security presentations, everybody keeps talking about that. So the new currency in the world is what? Data. So if it gets into the hands of somebody who's going to abuse that, where are you going to go? You can always say, I've got DR, I've got this, I've got that, but what do you do after that? Thought process? So that is another challenge which we need to be ready of. So there are laws which are there, but that's more from a routine, right? Law and order standpoint. But what from cyber crime standpoint? Next, intellectual property. Now when you or your company file up for IP, what are you looking at? You're looking for protection of your IP. Right? But you also want to go ahead and have people who can reprimand, right? Or could go ahead and ensure that if there is anything that goes wrong, your interest is protected. That's what you're looking for from an IP standpoint. So if you start seeing China, and if you look at other countries, a lot of other countries, not China, but a lot of other countries, is there IP, how is IP protected there? Start looking at these aspects of it when you're starting to go on, because this is what is more important for you to look at from a big picture standpoint, right? So similarly, when you're looking at getting data across from one place to another, it is. So you're looking at openness, interoperability. So we leave it at that, right? Last one, broadband. What is the penetration of broadband? I think one of the last speakers told that there is a 12% penetration, right? Is all that we have got. The good news, and I think we can all be happy about, that we are growing almost at the rate of about 120% of addition of new users as we go along. But is that good enough? And we are merely meeting about 8% of the overall population requirements. Is that good for a size of what we have got as opposed to a lot of other countries? Japan is looking at going ahead and getting broadband to every household in the next 3 years. Interesting? And if you start seeing here, so that's where Japan with the broadband plus a lot of rules. So Japan seems to be ruling the roast here, if you can't see that. India is way out here. India's score is about 50. We are like always, we are very evenly balanced, right? So there are enough rules, there are enough regulation, but that needs to improve. Correct? That's what we are looking at, because things are changing very dynamically. And why did I put this out here is for all of you to kind of go ahead and increase your awareness while you're going and looking at building solutions. For example, if there is Germany, there is a challenge with Germany. Are you aware? You can't get a lot of data out of Germany. Similarly, from India, I think there are a few data points which you can't go ahead and send out. I think one of the presentations we discussed. So just quickly for your information, from an Indian standpoint, right, according to the act that we have got, we can't send out passwords, we can't send out financial information, we can't send out health information, we can't send out sexual orientation information, we can't send out medical records or any biometric information from our shores for your information. So these are points which is there. So there's a lot of fine print in all the acts and laws that we have got. So you need to start looking at reading these things. Don't read all of it, but be aware of some high points, right? That will help you kind of negotiate and talk to people a little better. Very quickly, while we talked about these like a universal truths, what about business continuity? I have a question. What if your provider shuts shop and goes away? What if, right? What if the service is down for 5 days? Crypto is down for some days. It didn't kill anybody. But what if a business process for a bank goes on for 5 days? What do you think will happen? Are you going to resort back to your manual process? What is plan B? Is cloud everything? Putting everything out there, how long are you going to survive if the provider goes away? What is your thought process around that? We always talk about SLAs, we talk about everything. Where is the thought process? So I'm just kind of wanting to seed some thoughts. So you should kind of be aware of this. The other one, vendor lock-in, I think this is going to go away soon. while we talk about expectation, because it's going to be easy, like number portability with all the standards which are coming in, things should go out, but watch out for these, right? Till such time things happen. Faster innovation, something very interesting. You know how many releases does Amazon come out with on a month? 6. 6 a month. So tell me somebody who's working for Amazon today quits and goes away, says, boss, I know everything about Amazon. Within 2 months, where will the person be? Within 1 year, where will the person be? Innovation is happening at such a rapid pace out here, right? And today, it is like, unlike the olden days, right? Olden days is 5 years back. If you start looking at, a lot of MNCs set up their centers out here to clear backlogs, right? For a lot of us to sit down and clear backlogs. But is that the way things are working, or are we looking things to move? How much of patience do all of us have, right? Where we are looking at. So that is where we are going on. Most important, drive customer intimacy. Word for you is, what is your use case? Who are you addressing? Are you want to build something like a Gmail? Are you want to work with your immediate customers, internal or external? Figure that piece out. The other piece is meet unmet requirements. I'll give you an example. An airline company in the US comes out with a sales promotion, let's say in Thanksgiving. 5 million records need to be processed in 6 hours. Tell me, traditionally, can you meet that? How much time will it take? Close to 9 months or more, right? For you to go out and get that sorted out. There is a team of people who have done this in 9 days. The first 2 hours it takes to build the servers, right? 180 servers. 4 hours out of the remaining 4 hours, they're spending time to process all of that, and then they need to decommission the servers. Is it possible? It is possible. Why is it possible? Here, because first requirements like these were never thought of. So if the requirement is not there, people are not challenged. If you are challenged, then there is a solution, and you want to work on that, right? For which you need to know your entire stack of what you want to work on. So that's the reason why risk is good, right? It is going to push you. It is going to push you to work on something which the business aspired for, but the turnaround time was too bad. But today we have got enough people here and all over the world who are ready to go meet these requirements which were never ever met earlier. And the other thing for IT departments, how is IT going to operate is the way people are looking at, because all of us have got smart, right? Smartphones, a lot of access, lots of devices, our experience of using some world-class products, right? So when you go back to IT and say you want to get something provisioned or whatever it is, or you're looking at improving a business process, what's the TAT for that? Are you aware how this thing goes? So there are a lot of examples from an Indian standpoint. I'm sure you would have heard of most of these people out there, right? Let's move on. I think the PaaS providers, now some people say, okay, I could go ahead and build a solution. Now here, I want to pause here and just tell you one thing. Today, everybody's got smart, right, over the last few years using IT. What is that our users, our business users looking for? Who's got the domain? Not us. We'll say, boss, we'll go find out the requirements, then we'll design, then we'll develop, then we'll test, and we'll do whatever it is, right? But the business user says, okay, fine. If you introduce him to some PaaS tool out here, you say, fine, I know what I need. I know how I can design. I don't have to write any code. So can I build some things like these? That's where we are. And we heard enough technology of what is underlying. It's all transparent, right? And it's easy for you to experiment with all of these things. So there's a lot of business processes which is going to improve the efficiency of the organization and people. Is that made available to you today? People talked about the first one, the ERP was 600 man months, done in 200 man months, right? The application that is out there, I think there's one of the other applications was done in about, the CIMS application was done in, let's say, about 120 hours or something, or 120 days, pardon me for that, right? But that's the kind of turnaround time that we're looking at. So that's power goes to who? The users. Something different? Do they have to wait? Can they do it? That's where they go. Most important is the way we traditionally been developing things. First thing that you need to do is just change distributed file systems, right? Data stored across multiple geographies. Talking about latency, talking about all those aspects. How are you going to get that sorted out? We heard a presentation also on the vendor selection aspects of it, right? What are the points that one needs to start looking at? Point is, 50% of your problems should go away if you find the right vendor. But that's not the end of it. That's not the end of it. Why? I'm just going to jump between a couple of these bullets just to get home a point. We talked about a lot of legal aspects, a lot of other aspects all over the world, right? IPL is on, correct? How many times do you see a batsman wearing a nice smart? You have that nice sun hat or a nice pea cap, right? Do you see batsmen wearing those and coming to the crease now playing a T20? Or you find everybody wearing a helmet when they come and play because you don't know which bowler is going to come and bowl. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that? But what if they don't wear the protective gear and come? Who's responsible? The individual is responsible. Do you agree? All of you agree with this? So eventually, if something goes wrong with not only your solution or your subcontractor or your provider, whoever have you got, eventually who is the customer going to talk to? Who is responsible eventually? Who is supposed to be aware of all the compliance requirements and so on and so forth? Align your mindset. Don't just jump in terms of saying, hey, listen, this is for the cloud. So it's very critical to identify what your use case is. Very important. Don't get bogged down by what people say that security is the reason why I don't want to move to the cloud. Move that. Just go on, right? Do your POCs. Do your due diligence, right? Who stops you? Are you going to spend so much of money? I'm not talking about costs anywhere, right? But can you put some budget to go out and try things out? Can you not? You have an opportunity, go check things out on your own, reassure yourselves, reassure your customers. That's the way to go forward. And once you've got that going, are you on? And that's going to be a nice curve for you to learn a few things. But list down all those key tasks, all those key activities, all the scenarios that one would need to look at, right? For example, the last example I quoted with 180 servers to be built in, how many hours? So is there any manual intervention you think is required? Can't be. So completely automated. Load balancing and everything should also happen. The only failure point is if one VM, if that fails, can you do something about it? Can't, right? There are few things which you can't do about. But what is important that you can do, you have to see through the whole scenario. You got to be aware of your entire toolkit. You got to be aware of your entire stack, and you should get on and just going with it. Last but not the least, you are king. So when you're writing an RFP, insert in that, I think the stress that people have been talking about over a period of time, and I want to reiterate this aspect, include clauses in your RFP that you want to see out there. Ensure that you have the right to appoint a third party auditor to go into an Amazon or any other provider that you've got, right? Who would do an audit. I think some of us have got that capability. Most of us may not have that, right? But you want to do an audit of that facility and get that report, which is more assuring, isn't it? You want to go ahead and check that and get that assurance out here. So include that, because a lot of people say many things. The fine print, a lot of people who should be reading don't read it, and the legal reads it will not get a point of what we are talking about. And if something goes bad, who's responsible? You're responsible. Are we okay so far? So what have we got here? An opportunity. I think we have shown the whole world our adoption of wireless is great, right? Success story, building on from where we are. This is a point that we have got, and I think that's a real opportunity. I think this is the risk that we need to take, right? This is a risk for us to take on. Buckle up, pad up, get on, and start doing something new. It is enough that we've been doing of running the business. It's also time that IT and all of us start contributing to grow the business. And if you like the word, think innovative. I'm saying be more creative. Spend more time. When you're talking of a knowledge worker today, where are we spending most of the time? Versus where you should be spending time being creative, right? It's like a wicket keeper. You know what a wicket keeper does? But what if you really take the English meaning of it, what it should be? Take a knowledge worker. Should be spending more time being very, very, very creative, right? And should use all tools to get the other stuff done. However, is that an opportunity that we folks have here? So On that note, I'm going to kind of leave it with all of you to kind of think through, get more creative, take the risk, because risk is good. And if risk was not good, thank you for being here. And you just reiterated and confirmed that fact. Because risk is good, you are here. And you believe cloud computing risk is good. So thank you on that note. And if you want it, we could take a question or two. Thanks for your patient listening, and I'll take a few questions. This is how you could get in touch with me if you need to reach out. Any questions? If not, thank you everybody. I hope you have enjoyed the conference, and I think that goes back to Srikanth and crew, right? I think let's give them a round of applause for putting up such a wonderful conference. Thank you all. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you so much, sir. It's really been